time they meet the IGP, can they tell him that we asked that they elevate DOFSU to a directorate? There's no other police unit in Ghana that receives the number of cases that DOFSU receives, and yet they are not willing to make that a directorate so it can be more effective in doing its work. And secondly, the Minister of Gender needs to know that the Domestic Violence Secretariat needs a lot of help, because that's the secretariat that's coordinating all of these things. Otherwise, we go back to square one. So I just put that in so people understand that our duty bearers are also failing.
To emphasize that domestic violence is a criminal offense.
Right.
And people delineate. They think, oh, it's okay, I beat my wife, I'll go to the police station and then we'll resolve it at home. No, it's a criminal offense. And once that education and that link is made, people will also be cautious and be wide awake that we need to also have loving homes. When you love your partner, you will not abuse them. And that was the premise of the relationship to begin with. Secondly, the IGP is doing this as his social responsibility to help DOFSU, to help society to see this as a real menace. It is a challenge, and I'm happy to be on board with you, with other prominent stakeholders who are willing to sacrifice of their time to go out of our comfort zones to help people to understand that domestic violence is not part of our cultural values and we shouldn't entertain it.
I was involved in a case where a lawyer would actually beat his wife up, strip her almost naked, and push her out of the house. Okay? Now you push her out of the house, you are not only assaulting her, you are causing her emotional torture, okay, because you have stripped her. She's in the public space. Neighbors find her and have to give her some cloth to cover herself before they take her home. Okay, and then she's not able to even rest, find leisure in her own home. I remember the day her mother called me from abroad and said, if you don't go and get my daughter out, she will die. Now, if I read all this to you, you won't really see it until I describe some of the cases that we see.
Yeah.
A case of a judge, okay, who locked his wife in a room and kept her there for days. It took the striking force in those days to get the woman out. And you know what? This judge would open the door a little bit and give the woman food in a plate. He would push it on the floor for her to eat. I know cases, COVID time, we had to rescue a woman who had been thrown out by her cohabiting partner who had constantly been threatening to throw her out. She has a child with this person. And COVID came lockdown. Evening, it was, getting towards evening. He threw her out with all her things, and it was a nightmare to rescue this woman. Okay, so you see people who can't sleep because they are thinking about what has happened to them. They are getting flashbacks, hypervigilance because of what somebody else has done to them. I know of cases where somebody, and you see sexual abuse here in a domestic relationship, wife has just had a session. She comes back home. This is several years ago, and he insists that I'll have sex with you, and the wound opens up. Okay, so sometimes you need to get to see, to really understand, and that's why you have all of these specified in the law. Even when you come to harassment, you go to the interpretation section, and it actually spells out harassment even further, just to tell you how wide, how big domestic violence is an issue in our country.
You're welcome back, and this is The Law. It is your legal light and your health law. Thank you very much for making the time once again this afternoon to join us. And we're continuing part 2, economic and emotional abuse. And this afternoon, I'm so delighted to welcome Chief Superintendent Owusua Kyeremeh, and she is DOFSU Coordinating Director. Also joining us is lawyer Musa Ahmed, who is head Ahmed Legal Consult. Thank you so much for making the time to join us. Right. So, whilst we talk about the law and talk about the punishment for the things that are crime, this afternoon, we want you to join us to answer the question, what is your understanding of domestic violence? What are the acts that constitute domestic violence? And what can you do personally? You personally, what can you do to reduce or to end domestic violence? It happens within the domestic relationship, meaning it happens within family, within friends, within loved ones. Why must it happen? Even to the point of people dying. We'll be right back.
I am Reverend Dr. Joyce Ayi. Most people call me Auntie Joyce. I'm here to draw our attention to something which is contrary to what God designed for us as human beings. God designed marriage to reflect the way He loves us and cares for us. Domestic abuse is therefore totally against God and what He wants for two people who love each other and get married and live together and raise children. Unfortunately, there are too many cases of spousal and domestic abuse. We have to do something about it. You need to know about it. I need to know about it. And together, we need to rise against it.
I am James Opombuenu, the Inspector General of Police of Ghana. I am also a husband and a parent. As the Chief Law Enforcer, I'm concerned about the rising trend in spousal and other domestic abuse cases in the country. This trend is partly due to the fact that many of such cases go unreported. You and I should therefore have a rethink of our views on domestic abuse and resolve to report any of such cases that come to our notice or knowledge and see the cases we report through. The police will do our work, but we need you to support the fight against domestic abuse. So join me in the fight against domestic abuse. Say no to domestic abuse. Thank you.
This campaign is brought to you by the Ghana Police Service.
You're welcome back. This is the law. It's your legal light and it's your help law. So last week we had the formidable lawyers that you know in this country and who are also gender advocates who helped us to understand economic and emotional abuse. We are continuing on that trend. Now, she is the one who is in charge of that whole, outfit. And she's the one that you must have heard Dr. Angela Jomna-Boaji repeat this afternoon that her office ought to be elevated to a certain point of a directorate to help it to be more effective by serving you. So let's begin with her. How exactly or how bad is the situation as the IGP, James Opombuenu Esquire, has been talking about? Also, how bad is the situation?
It is quite bad. It is bad actually, because when you talk about emotional abuse, economic abuse, it is something, especially for instance, emotional abuse, that really touches on the very existence of a person. Because for you to be able to achieve something, do anything, it depends on your well-being. So if emotionally you are being abused, you are getting closer to having a mental issue that can affect you and impact negatively on your children and the family.
So generally, for the situations that are reported on the general issue of domestic violence, what do the figures look like?
The figures are very horrible. And for instance, in 2018, for instance, we had 9,393 cases across the country, strictly on domestic violence. Unfortunately, in 2019, we had 18,629 cases. And then in 2020, even though it's decreased, it is still very high. We had 16,586 cases. Now, when you come to emotional abuse, economic abuse, and non-maintenance put together, you have, for instance, over 3,000. In 2018, let me just get the exact figure for you. We had, in 2019, we had 3,731 cases of non-maintenance.
And
3,000, yes.
Right, and here we clearly are talking about the cases that were reported.
Exactly.
Because we are in a position to understand that a lot more would not have been reported.
Yes.
And we are educating and empowering you so that you will know first and then you will seek help. Yes, so continue.
And then in 2020, it was 1,548 cases that were reported. Now, we've started singling out emotional abuse, economic abuse to be specific. So in 2020, we recorded 913 emotional abuse cases. And because normally it's captured around assault and other cases. But now we've informed the data session to extract it so that we can be specific on these things. So in 2020, we had 913, and economic abuse is 77. But it falls under maintenance.
All right.
So we are in the process of extracting these information.
It's very good to know that this is what you are doing and that you can even, separate the physical abuse and the rest of them from emotional and then economic abuse. And economic abuse, you have been emphasizing maintenance.
Yes.
So explain to us, when we say emotional abuse and economic abuse, what are we looking at?
Okay, so when we talk about, for instance, emotional abuse, we are looking at certain acts that makes another person constantly unhappy, humiliated, ridiculed, jittery. A person feels unworthy. So any act, it could be by action, insinuation, words. So for instance, if you are with your partner or your children, and then you keep insulting the person, maybe in public, but you look at the way you are dressed. You are looking like, that I've heard people say, you look like a sack of cassava, a bag of cassava, and look at the way. For
people who are fat.
Yes, for people who are fat.
Or some who are big, not really fat.
Exactly. And then look at the way you are dressed. Some of them depend on for their maintenance because they are not working. So they can dress if you provide them the necessary financial support.
All right.
Most of the time, they are not providing them with that support. And so once they are not providing them with that support, they are unable to dress to suit your taste. And so as a result, they dress they use what they can afford. And then, as a result, the men will tend to insult them, to compare them. Have you seen this lady? Look at the way the person dresses. So emotional abuse simply has to do with things that you do that makes a person feel uncomfortable. In fact, there are times that people, for instance, when they have issues with their partners, they will threaten them in one way or the other. And then you'll be there, you'll see the person holding knife, as if the person is sharpening the knife, want to use the knife. It makes you feel uncomfortable. And there are instances where people will turn on the gas, will leave the home with the key without locking the door. Now, imagine at night, even when you've locked up your door and you're sleeping, you still feel uncomfortable. Then you have the door not locked and at home sleeping. It's like the slightest noise, you have to wake up, you panic. And then when it comes to economic abuse, it has to do with the deprivation or threatened deprivation of a property that a person has a material interest. Now, the catchword here is material interest. So it doesn't matter if the person does not own the property or didn't buy the property. As long as in good times, the person was using it. For instance, a vehicle. Maybe you bought a vehicle with your own money and your partner was using it. Then there's a disagreement. You decide to take the vehicle away from the person, preventing the partner from using is economic abuse. And also hiding the property or maybe destroying the property. It could be your own property, but you are destroying it because you want to spite the woman or your partner from using it. And then also preventing somebody or refusing to give somebody financial resources that the person is entitled to by law. So in this case, your children can fall under if you refuse to take care of your children, because it's your responsibility as a parent to take care of your child. So these are, in a nutshell, what economic...
I will get on to the Zoom and bring in Musa Ahmed, but when you spoke, you kept using threats. So by the tenor of the law, as I'm looking at it here, it says specific acts, threats to commit, or acts likely to result in. Then when you got to economic abuse, you also spoke about when the people are issuing threat and using threatening means to deprive people of what they may be deserving of. So it is not only the actual commission of the act, but even the threat of it.
Even when you threaten, for
instance, if you do this, I won't give you the car key tomorrow for work. You must find your way to work. If you do this, I'm supposed to give you money for school or to this. I won't give you that money. The threat.
For instance, if you annoy me, I will not pay your school fees. You are annoying me. If you joke, I will not pay your school.
I won't give you money for food.
If you joke this afternoon, you're not going to have, I'm not going to feed you. Or I will throw your things out. If you go and tell your parents that I'm doing A, B, C, D to you, I'll throw your things out and all that. So the fact that you have not commissioned it, but you threaten to do so, it is...
And it can extend to sexual deprivation for couple.
Because, I mean, you should have a reason. Having sex is part, in a way, of, in marriage.
Conjugal rights.
Conjugal rights, yes. So if you, for one reason or the other, you are unable to have sex with your partner, it is only fair that you explain to your partner that, oh, I have this issue, that's why I am unable to have sex with you. For instance, if a woman or a man has gone in for surgery, and it's such that she or he is unable to have sex, it is only fair that the person says, no, I can't have sex with you. And you need to respect that right, because having sex, going ahead to have sex with you will affect his or her health. But sometimes people don't listen to that, agree, and then they will go ahead, especially, for instance, unfortunately, the men will force and have sex with such a person. And there's been a case that was prosecuted many years ago on that basis, where the man forced the woman and had sex with her in the farm, at the farm, in the presence of their child, when the woman had undergone surgery. So under such circumstances, yes.
Last week, Irene Aboche-Nyahe said something that shocked many people. And I don't know what you think about it. I'm bringing Musa Ahmed on right now. She said, if you refuse to eat your spouse's or wife's food, as in you are doing that consistently, yes, and you are doing that to punish her, yes, one way or the other, then you are committing domestic violence or abuse, which the law recognizes.
Oh yes, definitely. Definitely, because, you know, especially under emotional
I'm not
abuse.
happy with you. I don't want to eat your food. What?
So it depends on the facts of the case. For instance, if probably you are with your partner and you think genuinely, not just assumptions, but genuinely you think that there are issues such that you don't trust your partner, that your partner might poison you, it's a different thing. You have a good case. Okay. But not for one reason or the other. Maybe your partner caught you with some unfriendly text messages, you know, or saw you with somebody in a compromising position, and maybe the person raised issues, and as a result, you want to counter by, you know, pretending to be angry or being defensive, and then all of a sudden you stop eating the person's food. There might be genuine reasons. For instance, maybe you close late at work, get home late, you don't want to eat because when you eat, you might be putting on weight, or it's not good for your health. You need to communicate to your partner and say, you know what, don't cook for me. I can take breakfast, but don't cook for me because I will close late. You don't allow the woman or whoever cooks at home to do all the cooking, leave some for you, and then you get home and you say, oh, I will not eat.
So for refusing to eat by way of seeking to punish your partner, and through that, you are making your partner constantly unhappy.
Exactly.
Then you are getting into domestic violence.
Exactly.
Okay. Musa Ahmed, thank you so very much once again for making the time to join us. Yes, please unmute. Great. I can hear you now.
Hear me now?
Yes, please. Yes, please. We can hear you.
Okay.
Great.
All right.
So when you look at the law, it looks like it catches just too many situations as domestic violence, which is punishable under the law for up to a fine of up to 6,000 Ghana cedis, or alternatively, prison terms of up to 2 years, or a combination of a fine and prison terms. When you look at it, does it sound to you that it is too skewed to, as it were, against the men?
Your last statement.
Does the law appear too skewed against men?
Well, it may appear to be so. For me, I have a problem with the definition as captured in, I think, is section 1B, 2 and 3. The ones dealing with economic and
emotional and verbal psychological abuse.
Yeah. You see, under Chapter 5 of the Constitution, we have fundamental human rights, which is entrenched. And the enjoyment of all these fundamental rights are subject to such laws as contained in Chapter 5. If you look at the freedom of a person, you can call it the husband. If you look at all the freedoms as entrenched in Chapter 5, and then you look at the definition of marriage, the rights of spouses in a marriage, I don't think I would agree with the lawmaker to insert in a provision that says that when you refuse to eat your wife's food, you should be punished. It is wrong. It is wrong. The marriage system should be such that a woman should not be reduced into cooking for the husband. Both parties should have the right to come and cook their own food, eat their own food, and enjoy themselves as husband and wife. So to say that when you refuse to eat your wife's food, or a wife, normally they narrow it down to a man refusing to eat his wife's food. For me, I disagree. Because as I said, The Constitution has provided fundamental freedoms, rights to every individual. You must enjoy those rights subject to laws that are provided. I haven't seen subject to marriage laws or subject to Section 1B of the Domestic Violence Act. I think that act contravenes Article 5 of the Constitution. That is my opinion.
Well, it's already law. It's already law, and it's been law since 2007. Until anybody has challenged it in the Supreme Court, it remains the law.
Yes, until somebody has challenged it.
Right.
I'm only expressing my view, that is the position of the law now.
Right.
And this is a discussion for us to tell our various views about the law.
That's right.
My position is that I disagree with that position.
Right.
You see, people are making a whole lot of cases out of it. I don't see how, as a man, having been fed by my mother, having been brought up by my mother, suddenly I find myself in a marriage, and then the wife tells me that if you don't eat my food, it is an offense. It is domestic abuse. It is violence against me. It is emotional stress. I don't think so. I think the marriage arrangement should be such that both parties should be free to either decide to eat the food prepared by one spouse or cook your own food and eat. But don't limit me and force me to eating somebody's food. Don't you think that when you force me to eat my wife's food, it is an infringement of my constitutional right as enshrined in Chapter 5? It is.
So and in a situation...
The Constitution is a supreme law. Any law that infringes any aspect of the Constitution shall be void.
Right. So
for me, I disagree.
All right. So in a situation,
one should not be limited to cooking alone.
That's right.
There is no law that says that a woman should always cook for his husband.
That's a great. That's a very great perspective. Now, in a situation where in Africa, in fact, beyond Africa, the woman's traditional role, unfortunately, includes cooking. So when you get into the marriage situation, it is a natural expectation, so to speak, for the woman to cook. In that situation, can there be an excuse that you the man are also expected to cook, and therefore if the woman cooks, you should not be expected to eat? And if you don't eat, and you do that constantly with the intention of punishing her for some wrong that she has done, why should it not constitute an abuse in the marriage? Okay, we just lost Musa Ahmed over there. A very interesting perspective he's bringing on board. But you should understand him from a certain perspective. He's saying that he thinks it is not right to see the woman as a cook in the house. If we see it that way, then we would always make the equation and say, she's cooking, you must eat. If you don't eat, you are in trouble. Right. So you took us through the...
Can I just comment?
Oh, you wanted to,
yes.
Right.
So in the first place, the Domestic Violence Act is not just for women.
Right.
It's for everybody within the domestic setting. And then, but unfortunately, it is just that domestic violence disproportionately affects women. One. Two, when we talk about a woman cooking, it depends on the practice. When you got married, the couples got married, the practice has always been that the woman cooks and then the man eats. So we are talking about that. We are talking about if you refuse to eat your wife's food within that context.
Right.
We are not in any way saying or enforcing that women must cook. A woman's place is in the kitchen.
Right. That's
not what we are talking about. What we are saying is that where the practices or the norm has always been the woman cooks and the husband eats, in instances where all of a sudden you decide not to eat the food, you need to communicate to the woman why you have decided not to eat. If you think that, oh, for one reason or the other, I don't want to eat your food again, I want to cook my own food, it's understanding. But when you don't communicate and the person, you allow the woman to cook, you know she's cooking, she'll be cooking, or your husband cooks for you, because there are some men who also cook for their wives.
Right.
For your partner to cook and then you deliberately refuse to eat as a way of punishment. And the question in law is the intent.
Right.
Intent is crucial here. So,
and here under the law, your emphasis was that, and as Arena Bochinyahe said, is that if you do that constantly,
exactly,
and it is intended as punishment,
exactly,
and then it results in what the law says, constantly making the partner unhappy,
exactly,
then you are caught.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, Musa Ahmed, I was asking that, clearly we will not reduce this to cooking, but it's a very good point you raised. Now, the question is, where the traditional role in the marriage, particularly in Africa, has been for the woman to cook, why should it not constitute an offense under the law as it is now if you decide to refuse, and refusing to eat as punishment, and in that, process, making your wife or the partner unhappy?
Again, if you look at Article 11.4 of the Constitution, that lists the laws of Ghana. Those practices she's talking about, they come under the last bit of the laws.
Customs.
For me, the last bit of the law should not be imposed upon the higher bit of the law. So whether it is your tradition or not, for which I disagree anyway, the tradition that a woman should be the cook in the house, or the practice that the woman should cook in the house. Marriage is a contract. It's a social contract. It's not a traditional contract. So as soon as you enter into the social contract, you have to leave behind your various or respective traditions. I may be married to an Ashanti. The Ashanti comes with her own tradition. As soon as we marry, we have to put asunder those traditional beliefs and practices and mold a system of life that will constitute our marriage contract. So for me, I disagree. One, traditional beliefs and practices constitute a lesser part of the Constitution. Two, a marriage is a social contract. You should not assume that practices and things exist for a woman to be a cook. I disagree. You cannot force the man to eat the wife's food, whether it is based on traditional or social context. Don't force him, because it is even domestic abuse for you to force the husband to eat the food by all means, and even threaten him that I will go and report you to the police if you don't eat my food. It is also psychological abuse. How do you threaten me that you go and report me to the police? And that one should be deemed to be a peaceful coexistence.
So supposing that you are married,
I will not.
She's saying that this is clearly under the marriage situation. You are married, and it is known that your wife is cooking. Meanwhile, you are eating from outside. You are eating from another woman. Perhaps.
No, that one is a different situation.
Okay.
You are giving a clean example where the man tells the wife that I will not eat your food. I prefer to eat my mistress's food or a paramour's food. For that, I will agree with her. But generally speaking, a man should not be forced to eat the wife's food.
All right.
It is against the man's constitutional right. It is wrong. It is wrong, and it is against the marriage contract itself.
All right.
Don't force it. And also don't tell the man that if you don't eat my food, you do this, you do that, I'll take you to the police. That also constitutes psychological abuse.
Okay. So you were saying...
They are always lifting the argument to the side of the women and leave the men's side. And
because naturally, in our context and in our environment, the women find themselves in a situation where this is what happens. When we talk about domestic abuse in Ghana or even across the globe, it does appear that women are more the victims in domestic abuse than men. But I was asking the question, you say your problem is with economic abuse and emotional abuse. So on the aspect of economic abuse, which is the law says deprivation or threatened deprivation of economic or financial resources, which a person is entitled by law, the disposition or threatened disposition of movable or immovable property in which another person has, like also said earlier, a material interest, and hiding or hindering the use of property or damaging or destroying property in which another person has a material interest. What will be your issue against that? And she gave the examples of perhaps you have a car and the car is for the wife's use, and then suddenly because she's done something you are not happy, you take the keys away or you destroy the car.
You see, if the conduct of a spouse is against the social contract, then you have to insist on your right, or to go to court to vindicate your right. This idea of always thinking that it is only the man who can buy a car for a woman is a cake. It's a cake. Look, the madam who is sitting there, look at her. She's well educated. She's a senior officer in the police service. Are you telling me that her husband can reduce her into the kind of reduction other men reduce their wives to by saying that I'm the one who will buy you a car? If you don't behave this way, I will not give you a key to use the car. We should treat the women as equal, but they should not think that it is the duty of the man always to buy a car and give it to a woman. You see, the law appears to be general, but when they come to interpreting it, they zero in against the men alone.
I think they zero in. I think we zero in against the most vulnerable.
Yeah, but why can't the women to, in a marriage setting, take a loan and buy a car and leave their husband's car alone?
Because some do.
No, but,
pardon?
Okay. Yeah, some do. Okay. Also, I wanted to say something.
If I give you a gift, I give you a gift, for instance, I do not have a right to come and take it back. That one I agree with the lawmaker.
Okay.
Don't threaten to take it back. But when I have my car sitting there and I'm using my car, I want to go out and you say you also want to use the car. And you say because you are a woman, I should let you have it.
Oh, no, I don't think.
You term it as domestic violence.
Mr. Ahmed, when we interpret the law, we are not interpreting the law to say woman, woman, woman. That's why we normally use the word partner. But the reality of the case is that the statistics show that women are more abused than men.
Right.
So some people will say that, oh, the men don't report. Yes, there are women who also don't report. So it's the same on both sides. We constantly say partner. So we are in no way saying that it is the man that has to buy a car. I know women who also buy cars. I know women who take care of the home.
That's right.
So in our engagement with the public, we are in no way suggesting or enforcing and entrenching the old traditional way of thinking that it's the man that takes care of the woman or it's the woman that has to be dependent on the man. No. We are saying that if you have a partner, so a partner could be a man, it could be a woman.
And this morning, we are reading a story of a man, 27-year-old, whose wife, I think they have 2 kids or so, he doesn't provide for the home. The wife struggles to make, put food on the table. And he comes home one day, there's no food on the table. He starts complaining. Before the wife could say jack, he pushes her and she falls on hot water. And she has burns all over her body. Yeah. So that's the reality, isn't it?
I agree with you. You see, before even the coming into force of the Domestic Violence Act in 2007 or so, we had a criminal code, the Criminal Offences Act, which dealt with all these matters.
No.
So you are now taking it into a serious offense matter.
No.
You understand?
Does the Criminal Offences Act deal with physical, psychological, emotional, verbal abuse?
The example you gave, that when you push your wife into hot water,
right?
That is a serious offense.
That's right.
I'm not talking about psychological matters here now.
No.
The example you just gave, that is why I gave you that response.
That's right.
I said before the advent of this law, the Criminal Offences Act was dealing with that aspect.
Perfectly agreed.
We should be careful. Even the statistics, she claims that there are more women being abused than men. I disagree. It depends on the definition she's putting on the abuse. Men too are suffering a lot.
Okay, let's open the...
Men were born by women. The same women who send their male children into marriage, they will be sitting in the house and supporting them 100% when they are abusing their wives.
Right. Let's welcome views from our viewers. We have very limited time left, but you can join us now. And my question to you is, what are some of the acts you understand constitute domestic violence or abuse, and what can you do, you personally, what can you do to reduce these acts? So you can call us 030-221-1691, 020-221-1692. If you call us any on these lines, and those of you who have joined us on Zoom also, you can let us have your questions. My guests will help you to address them. And as you realize, last week we treated part 1, we are dealing with part 2, and we promise you that we will give you an opportunity where you'll be educated as to where to report, how to get help, and the details of the kind of help that you can get. That will be perhaps for our next session on this campaign on domestic violence matters. All right, so if you're joining us, let's hear you. If there's anything you want to say briefly, let's hear you.
Yes,
yeah.
To react to what Mr. Ahmed said, the statistics shows that, yes, men do report cases. We have men who...
Very few.
Yes, but the number of women who report the cases are more. So it is not a
over
question,
90%.
Yes, because it's not a question of men don't report or men are being abused and they are not reporting. Women are also being abused. In fact, some of the women don't even know it is even an abuse.
All right.
Until you engage with them, because when they go home and report about what they are going through, family members, friends will say, oh, as for marriage, you need to be submissive, you need to be this, you endure it, it will work out. You see, your father or your mother, I've been married to her for 30 years or him for 30 years, and within the 30 years, I had to endure a lot until on the 40th year or so, things are better. So,
but you understand him. He's saying, the thrust of what he's saying, from my understanding, is that it is not right to reduce it to a woman's affair and disempower the woman by a certain projection.
That is his perception,
right?
Because that's not what we are doing.
Okay.
What we are doing, we believe in the empowerment of women, and we've been advocating that you don't limit a woman to say a woman's place is in the kitchen. Right. No, that's not what we are saying here. What we are saying here is that most of the time, it is women are disadvantaged. Women are more vulnerable to abuse. So we are not engaging or pushing in any way that it's a woman who has to cook.
Even physiologically, women are in a disadvantage when it comes to physical abuse.
Exactly. So we are not saying that, we are perpetuating what has been going on traditionally in the past. No, we are saying that as it stands now, and it's a reality. If you go to most homes, it's women who are cooking.
Yeah.
It's a reality.
Ahmed wants his daughter to live a life that says what the man can do, I can also do, or even better.
That's what we've been saying.
I am not to be subjugated to a man.
Exactly. That is what we've been saying. We are on the same path, but he is looking at it as though by saying if your partner cooks or a woman cooks and you don't eat, it means we are limiting the person. We are not limiting them. We are only stating facts. We are stating reality. And the reality is that when you go to most homes now, it's a woman that cooks.
All right. Okay, so I understand we have a difficulty with our lines, so we are unable to pick your calls, but you may keep trying. We may just be lucky. We can't always trust technology, can we? Now, Musa Ahmed, the reality in our communities, more particularly where you have less education and sort of empowerment economically and the rest of them, how will you look at how these things happen in those places and how they should be responding to the education that is given in this direction?
Your question, I don't know whether you can repeat it again.
Right. So I wanted to say rural, but it's not exactly correct to say.
That might even have a name for it.
Right, because we are even told that even in urban centers, educated people, you still have the abuses going on, more particularly against women. So I was asking, how should we embrace the education about domestic violence for the purposes of reducing it?
I think that these things should be part of our upbringing, socialization. You see, a person who is of age and has a certain behavior or conduct already learnt from his upbringing, it will be difficult to change such a person. So for me, the education should start with mothers, fathers, inculcating in their children the habit of respect to their partners, and looking at their partners or seeing them as part of their household, and giving them emotional satisfaction.
That's unstable. It's gone off again. Now, the question to you is, we know that the police, your job is just to look for the bad guys, I mean, men, women, who are doing all of these things that constitutes crime, to throw them in jail. So why has the IGP decided to take upon himself that you should go around, educate people to show a lot more love, to be more compassionate and, peaceful in their conduct, rather than just waiting for them to commit the thing, then you arrest them and put them in jail?
Okay, so we realize that domestic violence, the fight against domestic violence is multi-sectorial. And so we partner with other stakeholders to ensure that domestic violence is eradicated or reduced in our settings. Yes, police, our major role is to prevent, to investigate, arrest, and then prosecute. But we can also add our voice. We might not be going around like other NGOs who do from home to home, or on a larger scale like NCC will do. But at least we can also add our voice. Like I'm here right now. It's also part of the education. So we are not deviating from our role as enforcement agency. But what we are doing is that we are just adding our voice to show the public that the police is in support of what the state.
When the family is peaceful, it will transcend into the community. There will be less crime.
Because the family is a unit, and a healthy family will make a healthy nation. Now the children in the home will grow up to be the ministers, the mechanic, the lawyers, the teachers. So if they don't get the fundamentals right, it impacts negatively on our society. And as I keep saying, these are the people we are going to work with in our various homes, officers. I am sure, people have encountered people who have certain behavior and people don't seem to understand. If you get closer to the person and investigate, you realize that the person is behaving the way he or she is behaving because the person suffered domestic abuse.
Brilliant. Musa Ahmed, sorry, but your line cut again. So if you can conclude in the next 2 minutes.
I was saying that in terms of educating the on the domestic violence, we should go to the root of our system. We should start from the beginning. Women, our mothers and our parents should be involved in inculcating the habit of respect into the children, so that when they grow up, they know that it is not good to abuse your partner. You understand?
Right.
That way it will work. But you don't wait for the person to become a mature person to go into the marriage to begin to educate him about it. It will never work. Because once he has acquired a habit, you can't change it. So we should start from our education. In fact, we should even have a core subject on domestic violence in our schools, so that if we want a better marriage system free of domestic violence as she is proposing, then we should have it as a core subject in our schools.
Great.
And if nowadays everybody goes to school,
Right.
so we can phase out those who haven't gone to school. But let us begin with those who are beginning to come up.
Excellent.
And educate.
Excellent. We can't thank you enough. As always, we are very grateful. Musa Ahmed is head Ahmed Legal Consult. Thank you so very much once again for making time to be with us this afternoon. Chief Superintendent Owusu Kyeremeh, DOFSU Coordinating Director, has been here with us. But before we sign off completely, take a look at this again.
I am Superintendent Sheila Keseabiye Bachman, the Director of Police Public Affairs. The police is calling on you to join a force to stop domestic abuse. The actions you take at home, against your spouse, against your child, and any other household relation, and actions taken in any domestic setting or relationship that frightens, intimidates, terrorizes, manipulates, hurts, humiliates, blame, injure, or wound the people you live with, especially where you exert power and control over the victim, is of concern to us. Please bear in mind that you can be a victim and a perpetrator, so may I. Domestic abuse affects all persons regardless of their socioeconomic background or educational level. Please, why don't you join us to stop this menace? Join the police service and join all to stop domestic abuse.
I am James Opombuenu, the Inspector General of Police of Ghana. I am also a husband and a parent. As the Chief Law Enforcer, I'm concerned about the rising trend in spousal and other domestic abuse cases in the country. This trend is partly due to the fact that many of such cases go unreported. You and I should therefore have a rethink of our views on domestic abuse and resolve to report any of such cases that come to our notice or knowledge and see the cases we report through. The police will do our work, but we need you to support the fight against domestic abuse. So join me in the fight against domestic abuse. Say no to domestic abuse. Thank you.
This campaign is brought to you by the Ghana Police Service.
Right, so thank you very much for your company this afternoon. The very final installment we will do will be to show you how to get help, and the detail of the help that you can get if you get into a domestic abuse situation. Chief Superintendent Owusu Kyeremeh, thank you so very much for making the time once again. I'm Samson Ladia. This has been The Law. It's your legal light and help law. Have a good afternoon.